Greetings all! Yes, I am back in Sweden. I'm at Arsenalen, the Swedish Armoured Vehicle Museum. It's in Strängnäs, so you land at Stockholm Airport, you go west about an hour and a quarter, you end up here. And I'm putting the Patreon funding to good use. You can have a look at some of the more unique vehicles they have here, starting off with this FM28. It is the only one of its type in the world. Now the story starts off, of course, with the Renault FT. And although it was a fantastic vehicle, the first modern vehicle design, the significant problem with it is that it's, well, kind of slow. So Renault have a look at this and they decide, well, how can we make this vehicle faster? Well, their answer was to fit the FT with kegress tracks, rubber band tracks, new suspension system. It worked, in theory. It was faster, certainly. It also sucked off-road completely horribly, so Renault decided to start again. 1923, they decided to make two prototypes, the NC1 and the NC2. They differ in the running gear. The NC1 has traditional metal track links and coil spring suspension. The NC2 has kegress tracks and leaf spring suspension. They're delivered 1925. Very quickly it is determined that the kegress system is horrible and focus moves to the NC1. 1926, the French Army issues a requirement for a new type of light tank, and the NC1 is submitted to meet this requirement. It doesn't meet the requirement. For starters, there's not enough armor. They modify it a little bit. It becomes the NC3, which then gets renamed to become the D1. And that is your connection between the World War I tanks and those that France had in World War II. The NC1, however, well, they built it and might as well try to make their money back. 1927, it becomes available for sale as the NC27. And one of them shows up here in Sweden for trials. Now, if you're coming to this after watching the LK2 or the FM21 video I did a while ago, they've had new information since. It turns out the LK was not the first Swedish tank. It was actually an FT, which showed up ahead of time. Now, they knew that they had the FT, but they just didn't understand the sequence. Obviously was not sufficiently successful in trial that they didn't buy any more FTs, but they obviously gave Renault another chance with the NC27. And, wait, guess what? That's the vehicle we're going to take a tour of now. If you look at the front of the vehicle, you can see the FT resemblance. In fact, the NC27 is basically a Renault FT slightly elongated with new tracks. It has the same sloped armor design held together by bolts. It's got the same three-piece driver's access point, so the two hatches open outwards and the visor comes up. I do note that it is spring-loaded to help out. Has the same FT-type turret with the same 37mm low-velocity cannon. The vehicle's design is basically that of a hull with tracks bolted onto the side. So you can see why they have this support structure on the outside. It's not a unified design, shall we say. Otherwise, there's nothing on the front here. There's no headlights, there's no horns or anything. All you've got are your mounting points here for towing and craning. Coming back to the idler at the front, again like the FT, although obviously this idler is much smaller. You can see here where the range of motion is for the idler, and it is as far forward as you can go. So if this track got any more slack, the solution is to remove one of the track links, bring the idler back and start over. Track links themselves, simple cast type, they have that sort of early war intermeshed thing going. Single pin, they're held in place on the inside by an S-shaped cotter pin. Track tension itself is adjusted once you loosen up the locking sliding plate here by a large nut back here. You then come back to this first, I'll call it a road wheel, although of course it's not actually in contact with the ground. Now ordinarily when you see a single wheel like this, its purpose is usually perhaps to maintain track tension or to reduce the effect of large obstacles before they hit a small road wheel like this. Small road wheels have greater difficulty with large obstacles. Yet ordinarily when you see such a wheel, it is sprung in such a manner that it forces outwards to deal with bumps that are coming inwards or the track tension issue. But you can see that the hinge here is further back. So it actually goes this way, much lesser effect. Not quite sure why they did that. Moving back to the main suspension units, 3 bogies per side. You can see that the main suspension is enacted by this triple concentric coil spring. There are 2 hydraulic shock absorbers on each bogie as well. And you can see the range of motion. The top of the absorber is here right now, and it can go as far up as here. The springs mount onto a bracket. Each bracket contains 2 sub-axles for each sub-bogie. Each sub-bogie consists of the 2 road wheel pairs. So there's a hinge point here, and the whole lot hinges here. Standing up and giving my knees a quick break, I will call your attention now to the return run. There are no return rollers. Instead, the track slides along on these wooden blocks here. Now, of course, every now and then the wooden blocks will wear out, and they're very easily replaced. The other thing I'll call your attention to are these, I'll call them mud guards for lack of a better term. So you can imagine as the track comes up and around, it's dirty and it's vibrating and it's knocking all the mud and dirt loose, it's coming down. You want to protect the suspension units. So this mud guard here, which is angled outward, the dirt will come down and get deflected off to the side. Moving to the upper side hull, which of course is completely vertical, hand crank position. So you insert your hand crank into the socket here, crank away, the shaft comes down, makes a 90-degree turn inside and goes to the engine. Remember, the engine is forward here. It's more or less in this part of the vehicle, and with the transmission and steering system at the back, it's basically inconvenient to get the starter shaft all the way through the back. There is an internal point for cranking as well if you so desire. Single exhaust pipe only on the left hand side of the vehicle, and an air intake located on both sides. Going to the back of the running gear, of course the sprocket wheel is at the rear. It is a single row of teeth which intermeshes within the center guide system. Moving further forward, we have another of these little independent wheels, and this one's even weirder because it has no swing at all. It is fixed in place. It won't swing this way, won't swing upwards, doesn't do anything at all, I can tell, to help the track tension or obstacle reduction. The best I can think of is perhaps it helps to align the track to reduce the chances of it walking off the sprocket. You can also see on the inside, as the hull starts to narrow down a little bit, an access port, which on this side is removed so you can see inside of the transmission area, and a fluid filler port. The exact nature of the fluid which the fluid filler port fills is unknown to me. Coming around to the back, well, first you have the attachment points here for your towing system, or if you want to crane the vehicle perhaps. And for you modelers out there that are insane and want to super detail absolutely everything, I shall now open up these little access hatches for you. Now, these two at the back, as near as we can tell, talking with the museum staff, they are for adjustments to the steering braking system, little nuts that you can play with. This one here, we actually have no idea. This is an armored housing for one of the air intakes, so presumably from cooling, just looking at where it is in the vehicle and especially above the steering braking system, you can see that the metal only goes this far to my fingernails, and then there's a large gap. Just for completeness sake, on the left hand side, nothing of any great interest, no exhaust pipes or anything else like that, just a good solid pickaxe. Even down below, although the access port is present, there is no fluid filler port. And I'm back at the front of the vehicle. I will now open up the 25mm of Frontal Armour, and while I'm here I'll also grab hold of the gun. You see it's on a little independent pivot inside, and then you can easily swing the turret as well, at least from the outside. From the inside it requires perhaps a little bit more muscle. The main visor opens up first. Lock it securely into place, as again it is spring loaded, it helps. Then we have the two larger pieces. You can see how the metal is just kind of cut away a little bit to leave room for the various little components. And we now see the inside of the vehicle. Now it is missing the sling that the commander will sit on. The driver's seat is definitely missing. There is a leather backrest which has been removed so that we can more easily access inside. There is of course another hatch in the back of the turret as well. So Well, let's have a look, see what we can see. So once I'm into the incredibly uncomfortable turret, if I can get myself down, let's say shoulder pad on the 37, right hand holds onto the main pistol grip with a trigger. There's another hand here for my left hand, a sight to my direct front. And as I say, you're slinging yourself around by pure muscle weight, which is not all that easy with one hand. Good Lord. To see out, I'm looking at little vision ports. There's brow pads at least, which are handy. Can I see anything out up here? Nope, not at all. So I guess the height is really just for your helmet. There is a small little latch up here. Possibly you can stick a small flag at the top. The alternative is, if you look behind, you will see the back hatch, which, let's see if we can even undo this here. Probably not, but anyway, you can see how it swings out, again with two little observation slits there. Mounting points for the slings are located on the side. It really is bad here. I mean, there's no two ways about this. Ammunition rack for 37mm. I count on the right hand side here. Oh, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's about 40 rounds, give or take, perhaps a little less. And, well, of course, there's the coaxial machine gun. So that's basically all I can say for the turret. Then if you move down to the turret ring, and you can actually see the ball bearings inside the turret ring spinning as it turns. We then come down to the large rack for another 78 or so rounds of ammunition, all on the left side of the hull. Here, as I can tell from the cabling, the right side is where a battery would go. Then behind is the engine itself. The engine is an 8-litre 4-cylinder inline water-cooled, cranks out about 62 horsepower. You put 150 litres of fuel in the back and supposedly you get you about 120 kilometers. The engine compartment is reasonably spacious. There's not much in it. You can see how the air comes down through the filter system in the lower left and then goes in. The exhaust goes out on the right. Directly to my front, in front of me here, as I put down this extra lamp, I'm telling you, there really is very little room in this thing, is the internal point for the hand start. So the hand crank, for inside at least, I'm not sure if this works on the outside. This is how much room the TC has if he decides that he wishes to start the engine from in here. Behind the engine, you're going to find the transmission and then the control differential. The latter is by Cletract, Cleveland Tractor Company. It actually shows up in a couple of different nations in the interwar period. A modern control diff, although not necessarily the most reliable. And reliability was part of the problem with the NC-27. Driver's position. Well, I'm sitting a little bit further back than I ordinarily would because there's no chair and the whole floor is oily. And, well, I want to keep my laundry clean for a couple of more days of filming. The only gauges you have are on the right, and you have your pressure and thermometer. And presumably this will be the ignition because I can't imagine what else it would be. To see out, well, once he has the visor down, he's got these little slits. They haven't changed very much since the FT days. You can bring down a protective shroud if you're worried about bullet impacts and fragmentation coming through, or because the metal where it's gouged out is so thin, it's possible that the bullet may simply just fly right through anyway. But your vision is bad enough that I'm not sure I would ever actually want to do this. Brow pad, stop you bashing your head too much. Of course, the two doors will come in. It's actually not uncomfortably confining or claustrophobic, although certainly the amount of room you have for your legs is relatively limited. Still, I think it is a little bit better than the FCM, for example. Gear shift on the right seems to be a 6-speed plus reverse, slides in and out, very smoothly I have to say. And the clutch is the heavy pedal on the left. Now again, if you want a proper seat for this, you don't want the sling like you do for the Commander, simply because you're going to have something you can push against to depress this clutch pedal. Tillers. I do note that they appear to be interchangeable tillers. They both come up and to the left. Although I almost wonder if one of them isn't installed backwards, because it does look like it's reversible, so perhaps they should both come out and then in. Not really much else in here. I mean, it's 1920s technology, you don't expect to see much. So that's it. The vehicle didn't fare very well in the Swedish trials. Off-road mobility was meh, and the suspension and particularly steering systems came in for a lot of complaints about unreliability. There was only one major export customer, Japan. They bought 10 of them. They were known as the Renault Otsugata Sensha, or the Type B. They eventually were upgraded. They had 3 centimeters of armor. The 37mm was replaced by Type 11, which is basically a long-barreled version of the Poteau. The engines were replaced by Mitsubishi's, which actually did fairly reasonably for the tank, got up to about 25 kilometers an hour. Unfortunately, they still weren't all that reliable. They were used in combat in 1931-1932. And, well, the Type 89 that Japan already had by that point was proving so much better that the Type Bs, the NC-27s, were withdrawn from service shortly thereafter. So that basically ends the tour of the NC-27. Hope you found it interesting and informative. I'll see you on the next one. Moving back now to the main suspension units, 3 bogies per side. Moving back now to the main suspension units, 3 bogies per side. You can see that the main suspension is a triple concentric coil. The suspension units are suspended. Now we get to the back of the running gear. You'll note that the sprocket wheel is a single row of teeth with intermeshers within. I'll start again. Now we get to the back of the running gear, the large single spool side. I will also, of course, while I'm out here, grab hold of the gun and demonstrate just how easy it is to swing the turret.